It is time we eliminate these polygamy deniers. They have sown distrust in the church, and now we will destroy them. You believe Joseph did not practice polygamy. You believe Brigham was a false prophet. You believe the church was wrong about something. You polygamy denier. Autobots, roll out.
What Brigham and I did was very different. I was always completely devoted to Emma. I never had children with any other woman, and those who claim to descend from me and another woman have the burden of proof and have to this day been able to connect their blood to mine or be validated in any way.
Brother Joseph is correct. I was the first to procreate with my polygamous wives. What we both did was not the same.
Hi, my name is Jonathan. Welcome to the Haystack. The other day I did a video on polygamy in response to Connor Boyack and his video on that. And there I basically, called on people to have a little bit of grace. Let's not be condemning of one another or anything like that. I then shared my perspective and observed that whatever the law is, Joseph lived it very different than Brigham Young. And I think that's something we can all agree on. I don't think that's confrontational. The fact that the justification for polygamy was to bring forth more seed, and that seed could be covenant. In many times it is in reference to the Lord's seed, covenant seed, or then you have your own personal seed, right? So Joseph did not do that for that purpose. The other explanation is, well, it's only when God commands it. Now in the Old Testament, the prophets who were living that law kind of got shoehorned into it. It wasn't God commanding them to live polygamy. It was they're kind of pitted into that situation. It wasn't ideal, but the Lord made it work. And so I mentioned this is kind of how I kind of see things. I don't see that it's the church is fallen or anything. I'm not a polygamy denier. I'm not any of that. And the very fact that I watched Cwic Media episode with Brian Hales, and boy, he was quick to name call and form all forms of ites. It reminds me of being called anti-vaxxer when I just said I don't trust it. And now I'm validated. But is this the new anti-vaxxer? Is polygamy denier when I'm not even a polygamy denier? But yet, because I was saying, hey, well, I've read the other arguments, I've looked at it, and I think it's kind of odd that obviously they have reason. Brian Hill says, well, they're just trying to trick you into apostatizing from the church. Because if what they say is true, then all of this is not true. And that's bullcrap. That's bullcrap. That is 110% bullcrap. There's many people with very shallow, testimonies that perhaps would think that way, but that's just not the way things work. That's not the way things are. That's not the way it worked with Noah and his priests in Alma when Abinadi was killed. Are you comparing Brigham Young to all those people? What I'm saying is that we need to have grace for each other and have a discussion and not measure best arguments against worst arguments. Because the things that I heard Brian Hales attacking were not the best arguments, and I don't think the main view of the other side. I wouldn't know. I'm not part of either side. I just personally don't have a testimony of me living a law of polygamy. But I think it's disingenuous to say, well, these polygamy deniers, they have their own records, first-person accounts of Emma and Joseph and Hiram going over and over and over again, demonizing polygamy, and even having in his Book of Mormon written, one wife, and circling that polygamy passage for Jacob too. But they're just trying to trick you. Or maybe they're just lying like Abraham lied to get into Egypt. However you look at it, Joseph and Brigham, whatever the law was, they did not live it the same way. Joseph did not procreate with multiple wives. But he was visited by an angel with a sword that told him you had to do it. Oh, okay, so is that why he was taken early from us? Is that why he was killed? Allowed to be killed? No, those were bad guys, okay. So I'm just telling you, these are the discussions I've been seeing in the comments and seeing people have back and forth. And me, in the Facebook group, I posted a video that I think made a very good argument and said, well, let's address this stuff. What's the rebuttal against this? Because I have not heard Brian Hales rebuttal the best arguments. I've heard him build up straw mans and take them down. And then say, if you believe in those guys, then you're on your way to apostasy. And I don't think that at all. In fact, the people who believe Joseph was monogamous, who are members of the church, like Watcher Palmer, they're very much members of the church. They're very much, faithful to this church. I mean, we see examples. So one of the examples shared was, the Nephites were warned against whoredoms and concubines and all manner of awfulness, right? And they're warned, stop this or your enemies will come upon you. What happens is the enemies come upon Noah and the Nephites. Alma and a few escape. And they're not living this concubinal, they're not having multiple wives or anything like that. And to Joseph, it's understood that spirit wifery, concubines, all that stuff were all the same to him, multiple wives. Doing my own family research, my own family history, I was looking for a lost ancestor, and I found people with parallel names that were not my ancestor who were being disciplined by the church. 2 individuals being disciplined by the church because they were practicing polygamy in Nauvoo. They weren't supposed to. And then we have people in the Salt Lake Valley, leaders, who are being released from their callings unless they practice polygamy. But what does it matter if you just don't have that testimony of polygamy? It's not on the baptismal questions. It's not one of those questions. In fact, let me tell you why having somewhat of an error is not the worst thing in the world, and that the Lord's grace is sufficient enough to help us discuss this, and that we need to have grace and forgiveness and counsel together, and not demonize other people and tear down arguments and belittle them and just dismiss them offhand, because what do we do with those first-hand accounts? Oh, they must be liars. Either they're liars or they're liars. Or perhaps, your leader was killed and you're working the best you know off of the limited information you had. No angel came to Brigham Young and told him to do the same thing that happened to Joseph. So, and then how do you know who gets a wife? Does an angel tell you? No, it's not for everybody. It's only for leaders. Well, who makes that decision? Well, the Holy Spirit. Oh, I've heard a lot of people at Brigham Young, propose to girls because the Holy Spirit told them to, when they did not know those girls. They're just very attractive. And the girls are like, what? No. Or I knew you in a previous life. I mean, that happens at BYU so often, it's ridiculous. This emotional revelation. So I think instead of dismissing and name calling, building up all these forms of ites against each other, you polygamy denier, just discuss it openly and go over each point. So, okay, look, we have this record. Let's talk about this record. Why is Joseph saying this? Why is W.W. Phelps saying this? And saying that monogamy is Joseph taught me on this date, before he died, recorded in his journal. But then we have copies of journals and things 30 years later that we're relying on from people who, stole blankets from Emma Smith and were part of the mobs against Joseph. We'll take their account more. Everyone wants the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon, but we need that, William Clayton journal that we still don't have the literal book of, or it won't be released. These are just, it's not apostate. Calm down. It's just, why can't we talk about this? It's almost like we're having that discussion of what Christians say about Mormons, where they say, don't read the Book of Mormon, that's how they get you. Brian Hales is making the same argument. Don't read their research. Don't read their evidences and their records of first-hand accounts from Joseph Smith and Emma. That's how they get you. Like, he's doing the same thing. And Brian Hales is, on the in, right? He's well established. He's well well respected among Latter-day Saint scholarship and the church. So yeah, I think if he's going to be that well respected, behave as so, you know. Sit down with one of these other people on the Joseph monogamy side and say, let's just go point by point. Let's take our religious views out of this. And the reason I bring this up is take our biases out as much as we can. The reason I mention that is because Joseph Smith, or what's his name? Jared with Christian Homestead covered this very topic. I was preparing, going through all the footnotes that the church provides and citations. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. Then I started reading through them and I'm like, ugh. I'm like, oh, that's reaching. Okay. You know, share some of these experiences with my wife and like, what do you think about that? She's like, that's interesting that, you know, that instance happened. So I was going to cover it, but I thought, you know, maybe I'm not understanding this quite too much yet. So I'm going to wait till I research more of this. Mind you, I've been researching it for like 4 hours straight and had footnotes and notes and everything written down. And I'm like, maybe I'm going to hold off. I'm not going to do a video on that. Next day, Jared with Christian Homestead does a video on the same subject on one of the stories I was going to touch on. So I'm glad he did it. In his video, he mentions, I come from a polygamous family, so I get offended. It offends me when people say this. That's the rub. That's the rub. One, being offended is a choice. Two, it's a clear bias that kind of blinds you from understanding anything. How can you truly understand this? And I think this is what happens with a lot of Latter-day Saints. How many Latter-day Saints who grew up in the church would have joined the church on their own if they grew up in a different church? I mean, there is a lot of blinders on. And that's honest. It's not apostate. Chill out. And I get a lot of people who are questioning, like, you were reading that research? You want an explanation for that? I don't know, man. You better watch it. You're gonna slip. You're gonna fall. Like, slip? Like, what? No, I have 1,000 other reasons I would leave the church if I chose to be offended, or if all that other stuff. No, I don't. I have my own testimony. It's disingenuous to say that we're going to apostatize because we're looking at source evidence and information that contradicts what Brian Hales is saying, which the church is using. So, and I'm not saying Brian Hales is wrong, but I'm saying let's compare, let's get this down and have a discussion. Line it up. Just have a normal talk, like grown-ups, like big boys. I don't see what's wrong with that. Oh, because, you know, your whole career's on the line, you know, everything that you believed in. What if you have a paradigm shift? Have a paradigm shift. My video I did the other day was me saying, I apologize, I was wrong about this aspect on a previous video. I admit it. That's what repentance looks like. You admit when you're wrong and you grow and you change. And I expect everybody to do that. But we need to stop measuring bests against worsts, or building up if this, then that. If you believe any of that, then that means they're all apostatizing and everything. But like the Nephites, the enemies of the Nephites would come up upon them if they did not forsake their sins. And that's not just idolatry. I mean, we have that all over here. It was the concubinical wives. The same thing happened in the Old Testament. Things got bad when they picked up concubinical wives or multiple wives. And it was always pitted into a situation like that. It was not the Lord saying, Abraham, yeah, go for it. Or Jacob, oh yeah, I see you got tricked, you know, but now you're sealed. No, they're living in the culture, the day, the time, they're understanding, right? And understandings can be mistaken. Brigham Young had a lot of misunderstood things. A lot of the sources we pull for justifying polygamy comes out of the Journal of Discourses, which we don't consider canon. But we'll consider it canon as a citation for this, though. And that's fine. That's fine. It's record. The thing is the enemy of the church This church would have been destroyed if we did not give up polygamy. The same thing happened with the Nephites. And unless you give up this, you'll be destroyed. Well, eventually we had to give that up for us to truly flourish and grow and it's not always to build up seed, have multiple children. The way I've always understood, multiply and replenish the earth, it's not all about sex, guys. It's about the covenant. It's about the covenant, living the covenant, spreading the covenant, the gospel, missionary work, spreading seed. That is, bring seed unto me, the Lord. When we see bring seed unto me, I'm going to spread my seed. I'm going to, that's making a name for yourself, becoming great like the giants of the Old Testament that was completely demonized, right? And why didn't Enoch or Adam have multiple wives? Why not Noah have multiple wives? To replenish the earth or to compete with the growing evil that was coming. Anyways, I'm not saying this to justify one side or the other, but I'm saying it's turning into this you polygamy denier is like the new anti-vaxxer. You're an anti-vaxxer. The prophet told us to get the vaccine. You're going to hell. The reason I believe that doesn't matter is look at the brother of Jared. You can be mistaken about something. I believe the church is mistaken about its chronology for the Tower of Babel. And I believe the Exodus happened about 1265 BC with Ramesses II. However, I've seen a growing number of people going to an early date Exodus. I think that's completely wrong. It doesn't mean they're going to hell. Same thing with Tower of Babel and the Jaredites. I believe that happened at a different time. Same thing with Abraham. I believe that happened at a different time. I believe the church has those dates wrong. It's possible. I've talked with LDS experts, and they've agreed and said, yep, yeah, well, traditional until we get more definitive answers, right? So the church can be wrong about things. Brigham Young was wrong with Adam God theory. There's lots of things that he got wrong. Angel came and did the same thing that the angel did to Joseph. Brigham Young did not get that witness himself. The way they lived that law was very different. So some are saying, well, did the angel destruction come upon Joseph because he did not procreate? And one of the reasons for polygamy was procreation. Joseph didn't procreate. Is that why? Is that the fiery sword was allowing his death? Well, if I were to simplify the way Hales says if you accept Joseph was monogamous, then the whole church has fallen and that's in apostasy and it's all wrong. That's not true. If I were to judge it like that, I would say, well, if polygamy was the way Brigham said, then Joseph did not live it and he was killed by that fiery sword. And then he was just okay when the state demanded he change it. So we have to consider the law. Even Brigham Young or President Hinckley. You know what? I'm not even going to get into that. I will say, the brother of Jared. Why is he astonished when he sees the Lord, his finger through the cloud, pierced through the veil? I mean, he's coming from the Tower of Babel. He's coming from Mesopotamia. And there, all the people believed in a personified God. However, the difference was they believed in gods of bodies and passions. Anger, lust, things like that. So he likely had something of a more Trinitarian view of, God's a spirit somewhere. So when he sees the hand, that's now like, oh my gosh, I was wrong. They were right. God does have a form, but it was only partially so. So the Lord does have a form like a man, but he does not have these lustful passions. He is God. He has a different character than the character of the Mesopotamian gods they believed in. But think about that. he had a mistaken understanding of the identity of Christ. Maybe he thought God was a triune spirit. But his faith was so great, he was still able to pierce the veil. And the Lord showed himself. So it doesn't really matter. Did the Book of Mormon happen in Central America, North America, or was it North, South, and Central? Did the Exodus happen late or early? Was Joseph Smith monogamous or polygamous? These are all things that are dividing people that we don't need to divide. People are fighting over this. It's ridiculous. Why can't you just have a peaceful discussion and talk it out? Review it like a normal person. Makes sense to me. Anyways, I don't think the way Brian Hales represented the opposition's position was accurate. I know Michelle Stone's stuff. I've never watched. I've heard her a few times, and I didn't like the behavior or the manner in which she addressed things. And so regardless of wrong or right information, there seemed to be like a seated hate behind something, or not hate, aggression or frenzy. And the thing is that yes, you do have people who believe a monogamous relationship with that Joseph Smith was monogamous, and they have different branches of churches. Of course, they're going to think that they're going to serve towards their own understanding. But there are people who find conflicting information in sources where the more based sources are saying something completely different than what Brian Hales is condemning or promoting. And these are people like Watcher Palmer, Scott Palmer, who are faithful members, ordinance, they uphold their covenants. Yet we have people in the comments section saying, how do these people even have their temple recommends? I just think it's ridiculous. Anyways, my position is I don't personally have a testimony that I will be in a polygamous relationship. I believe that Joseph and Brigham lived whatever that law is. They lived it differently, and that's not disputed. They lived it differently, and we are no longer living that law, and we're flourishing. Did God come down and say stop this, or was it provoked by the state and saying after consideration in the council we're gonna, that means that you believe the church is fallen? I do not believe that. I believe that we are on the right track. I believe that we're doing what's right, and I believe that even if we make mistakes, the Brigham and friends were doing all that they knew best. They weren't deliberately lying, being deceitful. I think that they were doing the best with what they understood. We have evidence of records being tampered with. Then we have evidence of records being tampered with. And it's the same thing you see with parents trying to explain something to a kid's not mature enough to understand. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but the answer certainly isn't name calling and blocking others and saying you're going into apostasy if you even entertain that thought of looking at source material from Joseph Smith, where he testified that he never taught that, that he publicly was completely against that. Him, his brother, his wife, on her deathbed said, no, well, I have this other source from this other person who actually hated Emma, who said, yes, she did approve of it. Conflicting, are we going to take... So who's lying? Joseph? Why is he lying? To protect the saints. Protect the saints from a very thing that came out right after that everyone just was okay with automatically. Very convenient. I don't know. Let's just have a civil discourse conversation on it. Stop the name calling. Stop the ites. Polygamy deniers. Stop that. And just say, we're Latter-day Saints, who we believe. It's disingenuous to throw out all our testimonies that we have of our current living prophet and all the prophets that came before that, and say, if you entertain that, you must then forsake all of them. It's so disingenuous to say that we would lose our testimony that we have testified of and lived for and gained through prayer, study, and faith. So disingenuous to just say that that's all gone because you say so. Like, that's going to shake your faith. Have a trial of faith. You receive no witness until after the trial of your faith. Studying the source material and evidence should not shake our faith. We continue faithful, like Adam, not knowing the full reason why, and for the light and knowledge does come, and it comes by authority. I've said that forever. So let's just stop bad-mouthing each other and condemning each other and doing all this backbiting and saying, I think that person, I think he's gone apostate because he was reading the source material of this. And he doesn't believe Brian Hales. So he must be in opposition to the church. Okay. I don't know. I love you guys. I don't think you're stupid. I hope you don't think I'm stupid. I can be sometimes. But just, if you want to dismiss it on grounds with them. Talk, get on film, bring each point up, each evidence. Say, this is the literal record, this is the source record. Or this is a copy of the record. We don't know what happened to the source record is. Where the source record is. Do that. And just go through it one by one. And just acknowledge, yeah, I appreciate your research on this. Yes, I'd appreciate your research on this. Helping us come together. I understand you have a different theological belief on this. I understand you have a different theological belief on this. Bring what you have and let truth prevail. Anyways. Love you.